Megafauna is over 44 kilograms body weight, or about 100 pounds, right? The planet lost about half of all megafaunal species during that younger Dryas. Now, there was already animals disappearing leading up to it, because I think could be attributed to whatever happened at 14,600 years ago, where I talked about earlier meltwater pulse 1A, right? That's when the shit really started to seem like it started coming down. And then it peaked, younger Dryas, 12,850. And then we had the impact winter for 1,300 years. And at the end of that, it wasn't a gradual warming, it was a catastrophic warming. And by that time, I think whatever species had managed to survive some of the earlier events may have succumbed at that point. You know, the controversies come down to, was it nature? Was it climate? Was it human hunters? I think it was all of that, but I think hunters was probably a minor contributor to it, because for one thing, it now appears that the human population took a major crash at the same time. Like, we see that there's evidence that the Clovis culture in North America pretty much completely disappeared right at that boundary. Well, they weren't the only ones around the planet. Now, if you go and you look at some of the archaeological evidence, one of the things you see over and over again is, well, there was this cultural group in Japan or wherever. I just read a paper on that recently. And apparently there was some kind of social disruption, and they got up and they migrated and moved away. Well, maybe they did, but maybe they didn't move away. Maybe they didn't survive. And there was a tendency to think, well, you have this evidence of cultural habitation of this area for centuries or millennium, and then suddenly you don't. Well, people must have picked up and moved. But maybe that's not the explanation. Maybe it's more a case of they got wiped out.
And one of the things you pointed out before is the evidence of there's certain mammals that appear to have died instantaneously, particularly mammoths.
Yes. Yeah. Woolly rhinos. Yeah. There's been a lot of what you might call flash frozen animals found in the tundra.
And they found large populations of them that seem to have died at the same time.
Yeah. Mass death, mass mortality events. That's...
You showed some images also of what it looks like mammoths with broken legs.
Yeah.
That look like they had just been blown away by impact.
Could have been.
Or the
something like the Beresovka mammoth. I think that's the one I showed, which was a mammoth that was frozen into permafrost, and it was I think 1901 was a particularly warm year that year in Siberia. And there was a collapse of the ground that exposed this mammoth, right? And he was sitting on his haunches, and both of his hips were broken, and he had food in his mouth and in his stomach. He'd been eating flowering plants, but now he was 6 tons in weight, and even the contents of his stomach had not putrefied, which meant that it got frozen. And the scientific study suggested that the entire carcass would have had to have been frozen within about 10 hours to prevent putrefaction of the material in the stomach. So how do you freeze a 6-ton mammoth in 10 hours? That's where it gets, that's the conundrum.
And a 6-ton mammoth that had just been eating flowering plants.
Yes.
Which is crazy.
That's crazy.
So something had to happen.
Something had to happen. Yeah, something happened.
And quickly.
And this poor woolly mammoth got buried and got frozen. And we know he got buried quick because he had an erect penis.
Hi.
Well, because that's what happens when you suffocate.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Like suddenly entombed. And his whole body is now under pressure. See? So, very interesting conundrum. There's a lot of those conundrums that are not readily explained through gradualistic scenarios.
Have you had a conversation with someone who's a blitzkrieg hypothesis, who is of the opinion that the vast number of these Native American animals, North American animals,
I have not, but I'm pretty much familiar with most of the papers that they've written. And obviously, I think, like I said, I think that perhaps in the aftermath, there was a role for humans. However, when you see, the assumption is, again, that, see, what we know now about the lifeways of those late Ice Age peoples was that they hunted small game, they fished, they foraged. Mammoths would have been the largest, most dangerous animal to hunt. And when you think about the fact that if you look at the estimates for total global population back during the late Pleistocene, ranged from 5 to 10 million. The estimates that I've seen for the number of mammoths inhabiting the earth was about 12 million. So you've got at least one mammoth for every man, woman, and child, at least within the conventional interpretations, on Earth. Now, how do you exterminate not only the woolly mammoths, but the woolly rhinos, the mastodons,
North American horses,
the ground sloths, the horses, the saber-toothed cats, the giant short-faced bear, the cave bear, on and on and on and on.
North American lion.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I just don't think it makes sense. Now, what's that based upon? It's based upon the fact that there have been a few sites that were assumed to be kill sites. Like, for example, at the Blackwater Draw, Clovis, New Mexico, they found a mammoth skeleton with a Clovis point between the ribs, in the rib cage. Then they did this major extrapolation from that, said that, this goes back to Paul Martin back in the 60s, did a major extrapolation from that and said, well, they were hunting mammoths. Well, there we go. There's the explanation. So they came across in this blitzkrieg, like we were talking about earlier, across the Bering Land Bridge, connecting Alaska to Siberia, came down through that ice-free corridor, slaughtering basically all of these animals in their pathway as they went. Never mind that no indigenous group culture that we've ever known in history has done that, right? They were able to slaughter, and I mean, we're talking about even the megafauna of South America underwent as great a mass extinction as those in North America. So within 1,000 years from Alaska to Tierra del Fuego, every megafaunal species was wiped out, or half of all megafaunal species. In North America was 3/4. Roughly the same in South America, were wiped out so completely that they couldn't even viably replenish their species. I think that that's really implausible. And now, basically, with the evidence that there was catastrophic events that coincided precisely with the major mass extinction episodes, and the fact that human populations seem to have crashed at the same time, well, what that tells us is that, probably, you don't have a catastrophe that's going to wipe out 12 million woolly mammoths and then leave humans completely unscathed. We see the Clovis culture basically disappearing at the Younger Dryas boundary.